Well, prynawn da.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Pierhead.
This is a beautiful building, but it has been described as a very well-known academic, as a beautiful but bonkers building. I think he's probably right, because when you go outside, just do have a look at it. But it's a building that we try and use to its best advantage. So my name is Rosemary Butler, and I am the great pleasure of being the presiding officer here at the National Assembly for Wales. Now, I'm particularly delighted to welcome our guests, Janet Street-Porter and Sarah Edwards, both very well-known personalities in the media. Sarah, of course, will be chairing this afternoon's session. I want you to please feel free to speak in Welsh or English, because both are now official working languages here at the Assembly. Headsets are available for those who need an English translation, but they can also be used for amplification if needed. Now, I'm delighted to see so many of you here today at this continuing series of lectures that I'm hosting as part of my Women in Public Life campaign. Now, that campaign is aimed at getting more women in Wales involved in public life by becoming magistrates, councillors, lawyers, school governors, or seeking other public roles, such as membership of public boards, as well as hoping to become an Assembly member or a Member of Parliament. And central to my campaign is providing strong role models through a series of keynote lectures here at the Pierhead. Now, many of you will know that I've spent much of the last 18 months encouraging more women into public life, hosting regional seminars across Wales and a national conference here at the Assembly. And I was really inspired by the talent we have here in Wales and delighted by the actions now being taken forward. I met some amazing individuals and groups on my travels, and I'm delighted that members of one of the most dynamic groups are here today. And that group, believe it or not, is the North East Wales Women's Farmers Union, who've taken on diversification in farming with a missionary zeal. And they made it very clear they're not farmers' wives, they are the farmers. And if you'd like to look up what they're doing, it is really truly inspirational. So girls, welcome. Now, my tour around Wales confirmed to me that we, as women, have much to be proud of, but that we are not tapping into the experience, knowledge, expertise, and the perspective that Welsh women bring to public life. We all know there are many fewer women than men in public life, and as a result, their voices are not being heard. As a woman and as a politician, I want to see a fair representation of women in decision-making positions. So why do I want to do that? Is it just an ego trip? Well, of course it's not, because people make decisions based on their own experiences. And if those who make the decisions come from a narrow part of society, then society won't be represented fairly. And for this reason, as well as this lecture series featuring role models from traditionally male-dominated fields, my online portal was launched last week, where training, public appointment information, and a public forum is available in one place. Now, the following hashtag, which is POWhipple, if anybody is into these things, I'm sure it's actually you are. I think the actual hashtag is available for people to see. And the other online information on the screen for news on this, and also will enable you to take part in today's session on Twitter. Now, I said that as if I know what I'm talking about. I have described tweeting as with a very naughty word, which I didn't realise until some months later that I shouldn't have been using that particular word, but it is twitting. So this portal is truly innovative, offering the opportunity of access to a wide range of highly experienced women who have agreed, and I'm very grateful to them, to share their invaluable insights online. There's been a lot of activity and publicity about this topic in the last few months, and it is vital that the issues which I was mandated to take forward are moved on to the next stage. Now, if you are interested in becoming a mentor, please let one of the event staff have your details. And I can assure you, if you give us your details, you will be contacted. For today, however, I am honoured and delighted that our guest speaker, Janet Street-Porter, accepted my invitation to participate in this campaign, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her speak. I'm confident we will leave here inspired by her words. In fact, when she used the opportunity on Celebrity MasterChef recently to say she was representing 51% of the population and trying to ensure that women were represented in the final, I was delighted to hear it. Audience were around 5 million, so they all got to hear it too, and I hope they all took notice of that. Now, Sarah Edwards is a household name here in Wales. She, as you all know, has spent years chipping away at that almost indestructible glass ceiling, and I'm absolutely thrilled that she has agreed to chair today's event. So before we go any further, I should just like to share with you a short film we used to launch the Women in Public Life portal last week. And after that, I will hand over to Sarah, who will introduce the session and our special guests. I do hope you enjoy the event, and I look forward to seeing you at the next event. Diolch yn fawr.
That the Prime Minister will agree with the CBI and me.
Imagine you're at Heathrow, as I happen to be, and my office said you better look in the Daily Mail, and I opened it and saw that. That's me, by the way, when I got divorced 10 years ago. And I just wonder, would a man have that kind of coverage?
I think that gender injustice is possibly the biggest injustice in the world if you're talking about a disadvantaged group. Not a minority, a group. But I think it may be the biggest, most systematic, deepest-seated prejudice stroke injustice in the world, and addressing it may also be the key to achieving all sorts of other positive changes in the world in relation to sustainable development and peace and prosperity, and on it goes. I think this is a glaring injustice, and I'm impatient for change.
There are many fewer women than men in public life, and as a result, their voices are not being heard as effectively as they should. As a woman and as a politician, I want to see a fair representation of women in decision-making positions, particularly in public appointments.
Hello everybody. That film really does make you think, doesn't it? I'm delighted to be here today. Bore actually Prynhawnda. Good afternoon to you all. I'm sure that you would like me to, on your behalf and our behalf, thank the presiding officer for the groundbreaking work that she is doing and congratulate her and her team on the fact that we're all sitting here today. So thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. All of us know of her. Most of us know something about her, either as one of the famous ramblers of the world, or a radio journalist, a print journalist, TV presenter, and now as celebrity stroppy chef, who hates fancy food and being shouted at. She actually shut Greg Wallace up. Janet, I congratulate you. In fact, I salute you. We all cheered when that happened. I have never seen it happen before. The classic line was, I don't give a toss whether you like it, Greg. I like it. MasterChef, I think, has really cemented her position now as national treasure. If there's anyone who understands the media inside out, it is JSP. So I, like you, look forward to hearing her take on stereotypes on women in the media. There will be time for questions afterwards, so I'm sure we will look forward to those. But in the meantime, I'm going to invite Janet to come up here and to talk to us, or she might even give us her recipe for chicken Spanish style. But here she is. Janet, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, and I'm not going to shout at anyone today. So, yes, what I liked about doing MasterChef was it for the. Probably none of you know this, but in one of my previous careers as a BBC executive, I was actually in charge of MasterChef. So I've waited quite a long time to be actually on it. I was briefly on it when we did Junior MasterChef, but I was allowed to be on to, as a celebrity judge, but I upset one of the children and they cried. And Anne Robinson had to do a whole points of view apologising for me. And that's probably why it took another 20 years to have me back as a contestant. But what really happened with MasterChef was that, you know, I stuck up for women's way of cooking, which is to make food which we know is going to please the people we're making it for, and we're not so concerned about stacking it up in a neat little pile. But what happened afterwards was that I got literally thousands and thousands of emails and tweets from people who said they agreed with me. And in fact, what Sarah probably doesn't know is that the final of MasterChef, and this is the supreme victory for women, beat the football on ITV in the ratings. So I was very, very pleased about that. Well, my thanks to Rosemary for inviting me today, and also to Sarah for that very nice introduction. Far nicer than I really deserve, because obviously you don't get where I am by being anything other than completely ruthless. I always say to people, I come packaged looking reasonably, you know, polite, but, and this is a sad reflection of what Rosemary was talking about, you do not get to the top in public life or in television, radio or the media by being pleasant. That is a sad fact. Women do not rise up through the food chain by being nice. And obviously, in a perfect world, we could behave the way we do at home. But unfortunately, at the moment, in certain professions, to get to the top, you have to have an armour coating. I think that the work that Rosemary and her team are doing to encourage women to come forward, to have the confidence, to put themselves forward for jobs in public life is absolutely critical. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit about my own experiences and both my own career and a few reflections on the state of the media and stereotypes of women in the media today, but also as a columnist for the Daily Mail that I see figured rather largely in that film. I also write a column for The Independent on Sunday, and of course I was the editor of The Independent on Sunday for several years. I believe in writing a column in the Daily Mail because whether you like it or not, it is read by more women than any other newspaper in Britain. And so the way of getting my message across is to write for a newspaper that women are going to read and to put my point of view across and to make sure that it's not altered or edited in any way by the editor of the paper. But the fact of the matter is that wherever you look, stereotypes of women and unhelpful imagery, like we saw there, abound. And this has led to a massive loss of self-confidence amongst women and girls. And what I'd like to consider today is what kind of role models, what we can do about this. Now, I noticed when I was reading through research to get my thoughts together for this, that you've appointed Professor Laura McAllister as to head Sport Wales. Well, if only they could do the same in England. I'm going to come back to that later on. But there's a shocking imbalance in the way that women are represented on the boards of sporting organisations. When you consider we make up half the population, we go to all these sports, we win all the medals, but somehow we're not represented in the running of them. Another thing which we ought to consider is when people don't appoint women to publicly funded bodies, whether those bodies, how you can penalise them and how you can monitor them, because I think that is another big issue. It's all very well to have aspirations, wanting 40% of public sector boards to be female, and this is something that I've said for years. How do you actually enforce it? Because those bodies are publicly funded. Only 22% of the sporting bodies in Britain, that's only 1 in 5, is run by a woman, and a huge number of them have no women on the boards at all. One of the reasons we've arrived at the state we are now is that this issue of self-confidence. And reading recent research, I found that a study in America found that young women are actually leaving college in America with less confidence than when they arrived. Now that is extraordinary. And if this is based on intensive research at the highest levels of universities and colleges in America. If women were on courses like engineering, where they were in the minority, they were not helped by the men who were on the course. They were derided and made to feel even more insecure. And I find that incredible, because obviously that's a situation that you would have accepted a few years ago, but to still hear it exist in the 21st century is deeply depressing. In April this year, a study in the UK by the Future Foundation think tank found that 1 in 4 girls had low self-esteem, and they interviewed 500 girls aged between 11 and 17. And that think tank came to the conclusion that we were actually going backwards when it comes to self-confidence and belief in ourselves. So all the things that I fought for in the 60s, all the things that feminism campaigned for, equal rights and so on, we seem to be not just treading water, but we've produced a younger generation of women who are actually moving backwards. And this think tank said that if this trend of low self-esteem and low expectations and not pushing yourself forward continues, the chances of another woman being elected Prime Minister by 2050 has gone down from 73% to 62%. And if we look at the 2024 Olympics, 14% of girls now do not want to take part in elite sport. So far from the Olympics delivering us the next generation of sporting heroes, this crisis in self-confidence and low self-esteem could mean that at the 2024 Olympics, instead of women winning 19 medals, like they did in London, we might only win 16. And the number of chief executives of FTSE 100 companies that are women, the number will go down. I mean, it's only 3 now, so there'll be 2 less. This survey found that the biggest enemy of women was other women. It's a huge, huge factor. 45% of the girls that they talked to said that negative remarks about their appearance knocked them for 6. And most of those remarks came from other women and people their own age, so peer pressure is horrible. And 52% of these girls said they would be happier in life if they were beautiful. Now, in some parts of the UK, school children are being given self-esteem classes, but they're not on the curriculum. It's not a core subject, and it's not thought to be that important yet. But when you look at the impact it could have on productivity, and, you know, it just is shocking. Miriam Clegg spoke at a gender agenda conference in London recently, and she said she doesn't want quotas on boards to be mandatory, but she agrees now, because it's taking so long to move women into the boardroom, that she thinks that quotas should be a temporary measure. Out of the FTSE 500 companies, 350 have failed to set out their plans for increasing the number of women at board level. When you hear that the number of women at board level is increasing, it's only increasing at the lower level, not at a senior level. A huge number of the FTSE 100 companies still have all male boards. Our government set out voluntary quotas. My heart sunk when they did this, of 25% of the FTSE 250 companies should have women on, we should have 25% of the board, 25% of the board composition should be female by 2015. Everybody is dragging their feet. In Germany, they're going to set legally binding quotas of 30% by 2020. At the moment in Germany, only 4% of the top corporate jobs are occupied by women, so they've got a huge amount of catching up to do. But our track record is not good compared to Sweden, France and Finland, where far more women are at 20% already on the boards of their major companies. In this country, there's another reason to be worried about women not having self-confidence, and that's, if you haven't got confidence, you're not going to move up to senior management. Now, as we've read recently, more women than ever are going out to work and are in full-time employment since the recession. I think the figure has gone up something like, well, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read my garbled notes here. I think the figure's gone up 12% over the last few years. But what's also emerged is that of new jobs, 3 out of 5 new jobs are going to men. So any new jobs that are being created, women are losing out because, once again, they're not putting themselves forward. And also the impact of public sector cuts hasn't really been felt yet, because the majority of them are still to come, and that will mean that more women than men, will lose their jobs. So in employment, it's not a good time for women. We shouldn't be overconfident. When we read that the majority of senior roles in the National Health Service are currently held by women, I'm not that happy, because I think that cuts are to come and those women will lose their jobs. We have to work out a way to build women's confidence from school. It's no point now dealing with my generation. We're the hardened old battle axes. But I worry when I collect newspaper headlines that everyone seems like a body blow, and you saw quite a few in your film. How many of you remember seeing recently, Sterling Moss said, "Women lack the mental strength for Formula One." It's disgusting. 6 sports in the United Kingdom have no women whatsoever on their boards, and one of those sports is cycling. And isn't it amazing when we have all these female cyclists that the newspapers love to photograph, they don't want them on their boards. And it took till December 2011 for the Football Association to appoint the first woman to their board. There's never been a woman who's the chair or the senior director of the CBI. There's no woman who's considered suitable to be the chief executive of the Financial Conduct Authority. Our 5 major banks don't have women running them. The coalition government said that they had an aspiration that half of the public appointments would be female by 2015. All I can say to that is ha bloody ha. When we look at law, for example, our most senior judge, female senior judge in the UK, Baroness Hale of Richmond, said recently, it's men choosing men. In the 10 years since she has been appointed to the highest level of the judiciary in the UK, the 13 appointments to the Supreme Court have all been men. So we still only have 1 woman in the Supreme Court. It's shocking. This week, we saw the government announce reshuffles. Well, it was like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic as far as women are concerned. In the British government, the number of women in senior jobs rose from 23 to 25. That's out of 125 posts in government. Analysts reckon that women now make the majority of the major spending decisions in the UK. We control the household budget. We do decide what cars we're going to buy, what major appliances we're going to buy. We have huge purchasing power. In fact, it's reckoned that we control 70% of the spending decisions in the UK. But we only control 20% of the power in Whitehall. We only are 22% of the MPs in Westminster. Although we might be 40% of the shadow cabinet, we're only 9% of the judges. Now, it's easy to see that women still face a supreme challenge, because when I started talking about the glass ceiling, when I started out on my career, people talked about the glass ceiling. Now I think what's happened is we've got a concrete ceiling. And since the recession started, we might be coming out of it, but it's affected women far more than it's affected men. So on top of this crisis of self-confidence amongst young girls, 11 to 17-year-olds, we've also got a soaring rate of depression amongst women in general. The rates, doctors reckon that depression rates have doubled amongst women in the last 40 years. And since the 2008, research has shown that women are carrying the biggest mental burden, if you like, of recession stress. When asked, what are they worried about? 66% of women surveyed are worried about the cost of living, compared to 42% of men. 43% of women are worried about their children's prospects and whether they're going to get a job, compared to 33% of men. 55% of women are worried about their own job and lack of money, compared to 42% of men. So we've soaked up all the worry on their behalf. At a conference this week, Miriam Clegg said that 55% of girls aged 11 to 21 have complained that there aren't enough role models, which kind of neatly brings me back to the title of this talk, which was Stereotypes of Women, and whether they're helpful. But where are they? Where are the role models that women can relate to today? How can we inspire women, young women, to get them out of this downward spiral that they seem to have got into? Well, if I give you a brief run through my own experience, I went to grammar school. I was lucky. I went to an all-girls school, but that didn't stop the other girls, the way that they are, picking on your appearance and any slight difference to everybody else. But I must say I was a tough person, but I didn't have any role models because this is back in the 1950s, and I can't honestly think of a single role model. So I kind of ploughed my lonely furrow, looking a bit weird, deep down thinking I'm right, everybody else is wrong. I still think like that. And then I decided I would study architecture, and when I got to architectural school, there were 5 girls and 95 boys. So there it was, imbalanced straight away. I mean, obviously there were certain pluses to that imbalance, but it was kind of shocking. When I started, I took a year off after doing 2 years of architecture, and I started work on a magazine, teenagers magazine, and then I didn't ever go back to college. I was poached by Fleet Street, and I was working on the Daily Mail at the age of 21, and all the women sat in an office called the female office, it was FEMAIL, off the main editorial floor. And the women were all treated like a special rare breed and asked to do, you know, odd, strange things that, you know, I found very, very funny. But I encountered such prejudice from the men that I worked with, but you just got on with it. You just got on with it. And then I moved into radio in 1973 and then into television in 1975. And I can just tell you that there's nowhere more chauvinist in the 70s and 80s than a television studio, because there were no women in technical jobs on the studio floor. So you'd be presenting a program. I don't know if it's still true today. I think it is. We have a few sound engineers, but not very many, women, and a load more directors, but actually the camera operators on a studio floor are primarily men who just stand there and sneer at what you're doing. But my biggest enemy, I still didn't have any role models, because, you know, I was a working class person with a strange accent, big frilly teeth and funny hair. I was picked on over my appearance, not just by magazines like Private Eye and cartoonists and stuff like that, and television critics. I could accept all that. That was fine, and my accent being mocked and being a spitting image puppet, that's fine. What really got my goat was other women constantly harping on about it, constantly going on about my appearance. But in the end, you just do win through, but it takes, in my case, 20 years. And also that's why I quickly moved from being in front of the camera, where your appearance is going to be endlessly picked over, to being an executive, which meant that I held the power, and I went eventually to work at the BBC, where I ran a big department and was in charge of like £40 million worth of programming. I could hire and fire people then. I had the real power. So that's the message we've got to get across to today's schoolgirls who see the X Factor, they see all this emphasis on packaging and the external part of the people that they watch on television. They see, you know, in magazines and on the internet, they go to that Daily Mail sidebar of shame endlessly. They see all these images of women who are packaged in a certain way, but the message we have to get across to young girls is that you've got to have the real power and then you're in control. I've had that power both as a television executive and as a newspaper editor. And once you've had that power, you never go back. And also, as we've heard earlier from Rosemary, once you have the power, you can create a workplace where women aren't something to be remarked upon, they are just the norm. I think the problem that we have at the moment is that every aspect of the media focuses on women's appearance. We have this over-focus on what shape we should be. We write about non-existent medical threats. It seems to me that you can't pick up a newspaper from one day to the next without reading about old hands or wrinkly knees or bits of our body that have aged quicker than other bits. And a lot of this gibberish is written by other women. It's what I call the oil of evening primrose oil journalism. It's just journalism about complete twaddle, space-filling rubbish. But what it does, it passes on this anxiety that you're not living up to some perfect woman. But none of us are perfect. I could go around this whole room and everybody would have something they were happy with and something they didn't feel right about their body. But we're just made up of many different parts. But when you read the women's pages in magazines and newspapers, and now we have a huge press of magazines dedicated to offering us images we can't possibly live up to, the sum result of that has been this deep-seated lack of confidence in young women. We now, if you were to believe what you read in the newspapers, you'd think that women have more illnesses than men, because we've always got conditions that need great big articles written about them. We've got all these emotional things going on that we never read columns written about men for men's, emotional needs, but we have about 5 articles a day written about stress, anxiety about all sorts of things. I think you look at programmes like The X Factor, you see women, and I know from my own experience in a television studio, the way that those women are presented to you has taken hours and hours of manipulation. They are poured into those frocks, they are sit in makeup for hours, their hair is done, they're shot from certain angles, they're lit from below so all the wrinkles are bleached out by the lighting. None of us could ever look like that. In fact, even when I'm on television, I'm lit, I look $1 million. But, when I walk down Oxford Street or go to the station afterwards, how many people say to me, "You look tired"? Well, that's the way real women look, isn't it? I mean, we look tired, we are tired. We've got bags under our eyes, but you won't see a bag on the X Factor because it'll have all been bleached out by the lighting. And then the dresses that the people wear, I also think, implies to young women that that's the correct way to look. Every time I see a photo, for example, of a Britain's Got Talent audition, what are these women doing in off-the-shoulder dresses that barely cover their backsides in some freezing cold part of Britain in the middle of the day? I mean, who goes around like that? But, it's a drip, drip, drip. And recently we've seen, with Miley Cyrus, a Disney, hero transformed overnight by marketing into whatever, Lolita. I mean, it's just hideous. And Annie Lennox and Sinead O'Connor have come forward and started the debate about this isn't pop, it's pornography. Some people have said, well, show me a teenage girl that doesn't want to look sexy. But I think that Miley Cyrus is something else. I look at the pictures of her and I'm reminded of Britney Spears. Can we all remember that trajectory, which ended with her shaving her hair off? It's like watching a meltdown. Rihanna, what's going to happen? Where can you go after you've let it all hang out? Where'd you go? You've just shown everything, so what's left to do? I think that role models if you're thinking of finding role models in pop or TV, you're going to be really, really hard pushed. So I would say that one of the ways to deal with a lack of confidence amongst young women is to find mentors within their own community, to find people that went to their school that did well, that come back and talk to them, to find people who look, normal, who've succeeded, as opposed to women who are a size 8. I think that education is at the root of change. I think it has to start at primary school. Young women need protection from peer pressure. They need to build up confidence during their vulnerable teenage years. They need mentors at school, and then they need more mentors at university. They also need a strategy for their career, because one of the other most depressing things allied to this lack of self-confidence is the number of young women who want to go into the media or be pop stars or want to go on to think that their life would improve immeasurably if they're on a reality TV show. They want to be famous. If you ask young people what they want to do, the vast majority just say, I want to be famous. But of course, they've got to live in the real world. They need to have a strategy for their careers, but most of all, they need to be brave. So we have to teach young girls how to be brave, how to hold your head up, and how not to listen to the people that tell you you're weird. They need a subtle, non-threatening approach. They need to be shown how to constantly set goals and move on. And when they get to work, when they get their first job, they need to identify supporters and enemies in the workplace. Because once you enter the world of work, don't think that all the women in your workplace are your mates. Far from it. Especially in a recession when companies are downsizing, women aren't always going to support other women. So that's where you have to grow this tough skin, and you have to be focused about what your goals are and how you're going to achieve them. I think we can turn the crisis of confidence round, but I don't underestimate the task ahead. Because the fact of the matter is that at school, girls do well. They do better than boys academically, and they often get better degrees. But I wrote in one of my newspaper columns last week, they've just done a survey of girls that got first-class honours degrees and looked at how they fared in the workplace against men with the same degrees. They actually earn less. And that comes right back down to lack of confidence at the interview, lack of confidence when you're applying for a job, setting your sights too low, fear of rejection and fear of failure. When teenage girls see Rihanna travelling on the underground looking so confident, Lady Gaga, what they don't realise is that these women are brands. They have a huge team of people behind them, choosing their clothes, getting them ready, standing them up. We've read the hilarious court report about the woman who's suing Lady Gaga for sacking her, who was her personal assistant, who said her jobs included actually sleeping in the same bed as her to make sure she got up, and even buying her tampons for her. She had to do everything for Lady Gaga. Now, all right, that might be an extreme case, but you don't become a pop star without a support system. You don't continue to stay at the top of your game and sell however many records Rihanna has sold, 40 million records or something, without marketing and people constantly planning your life for you. But that is not a realistic goal for anyone. And who'd want it anyway? She's the prisoner of her own success. What bothers me is that young girls who could be redressing all these balances in our FTSE 100 boards, in our public service boards and so on, they're never going to get anywhere unless we mentor them now. And I go back occasionally to my old grammar school, which is now comprehensive, and I talk to the girls, and we need to put that kind of network in place where women talk to other women and say, you can do it. Because if we don't do it, we're heading for disaster. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah, well, how do you want to do it? I'll stand up, that's fine. Come on, I'll stand up.
I'd just like to say thank you very much indeed to Janet for that very hearty exploration of really difficult issues. And I'm sure that so many of the things that you've talked about will resonate with our audience here. So this is the moment when the floor is yours, basically, to ask Janet anything you like. All I would ask is that if you have a question, please wait until the roving mic gets to you, because we've got one on either side, and just let us know your name and where you're from. That would be very helpful. Thank you very much. Who'd like to go first? There's a lady on the end there.
Hello, my name's Sue Williams. I was involved in primary education for 40 years as a primary school head latterly, and recognise many things that you have just highlighted. And it's just really an observation that as much as we need to work in primary schools on girls' self-esteem, there are other elements. I think there's an element that mothers of boys need to educate their sons to respect women. I also think that toy manufacturers ought to really look at how they market toys for young children. Lego, which is God knows how old, has just for the first time made a female scientist for their science set or whatever. And there was Let Toys Be Toys is an organisation I've been following on social media since my retirement, because I'm a sad old cow. But they have been looking at toy marketing, and one of the big toy, one of the big companies, I think it was Marks and Spencer's actually, had actually advertised a magnifying glass as a boy's toy, because boys love investigation and so these expectations of girls wanting dolls and ironing boards and boys wanting fun, things like science sets and so on, are very real. And I think that the problem is much wider than just making girls have self-esteem.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm on the board of the Science Museum, actually. I'm on the main board of the Science Museum group, which is the Railway Museum, the Media Museum, the Museum of Science and Industry, and the Science Museum in London. And I've been on the board for at least 4 or 5 years now. But when I was first on the board, there were very few women on it, but they have appointed a lot more women because they're very keen to raise, because the Science Museum, for example, has more visits from school children than any other museum in the world. And obviously, boys and girls at primary schools go, but then the number of women entering science is not good enough. So, we've got to do so much more work to get across that women can do really, really well in the sciences. Yeah, but your point about mothers have to educate their sons in how to treat women is critical, I think, because now we have all this photo sharing and girls are being encouraged to show themselves sexually on phones and on the internet, and how do parents police that? One of the things that I spoke about on television the other week is that I feel that all phones should be removed from kids at school, full stop. I can't see why they're even allowed to take phones into schools. And also we seem to have gone too far down the road of talking about their rights. They haven't got any rights, they're children. I mean, they've got rights, but they haven't got the right to have a phone and the right to... phones have become like weapons. So if I see a mobile phone in the hand of a boy, I know that the girls anywhere near him are going to be worried. And I think that schools should take a stand now, say we're not having any phones in the school building from the minute the day starts to the minute you leave the gate, and I want to see a bin or a locker at the school gates locking the phones up, because it's absolutely insidious what it's done to girls. And girls don't go along with this showing themselves, they're frigid, and if they do, they're slags. So they're in a no-win situation either way. And there was that film about sex addiction on Channel 4 last week, and you see that by the time that teenage boys get to 14 or 15, they're watching porn on the internet all the time, and who's controlling it? So we're in very dangerous waters, and I just think you've got to take the phones away from schools. Parents have got to monitor what goes on at home, but it all comes down to parents have got to be parents. Do they want to be? Because looking at some things that happen, you wonder. Yeah.
I can see a lot of nodding heads in the audience. Who else would like to ask a question? The lady on the aisle, just here.
I just wanted to ask a question. You mentioned about women not being on boards and not being on really high level boards in the UK. Do you have any ideas or any practical ideas? I mean, Obama at the moment just appointed Janet Yellen as the head of the Federal Reserve, and apparently she was second in command for years, so she must have been overlooked for a lot of years. Yeah. I just wanted to know if you have any sort of practical ideas that you think that maybe Britain can learn something from that, and we probably can get there, or if we are there now, can we have another woman who would be appointed, probably the Exchequer?
I can't see why there aren't more women on the Bank of England Monetary Committee. Isn't there one at the moment? I believe there's only one. Well, everybody sitting in this room can do something all by themselves. You can stop using a bank that doesn't have a woman on the board. And you can stop using a bank. We've got the purchasing power, we just don't use it. We could, we could boycott manufacturers, we could boycott services, we could boycott companies that don't represent us adequately at board level. It's easy. If Barclays don't have enough women on the board, switch to another bank. Right, so, just use your purchasing power to make a statement. If you don't think Tesco's got enough women on the board, start going to Morrison's or start going to another supermarket. I think the most scandalous thing is that the government, the British government, does not insist that any organisations that are publicly funded have 50% women on the board, because women are all paying tax and national insurance, so why aren't they getting their money's worth in running the companies that their money's going through? Because it's our money that goes on this journey, doesn't it? And ends up, the BBC is another good example, funded by us. So we should have exact proportional representation on the board of any company that receives public funds. I just can't see why it hasn't happened. But I've always been in favour of quotas that are legally imposed, and that maybe after a certain period of time they could be withdrawn if they prove successful. But at the moment, progress to get the right number of women on the boards of FTSE companies is so slow. And why should we feel it's something that has to evolve? We've had the vote for goodness knows how long. I just find this incredible.
Thank you very much for that question. We've got one now in the second row here.
Thank you. It's very interesting to hear what you had to say about women engaging and getting into bigger roles. Do you think it may be something to do with the apathy of women, in that they aren't? We talked about potentially there's a fantastic idea there with a women's bank, because there are so many problems with credits and people having problems with payment. That would be a fantastic idea. But do you think it's more a lack of energy for people women to get together to actually do something, or?
Well, I do speak at a lot of women's networking lunches, and there are throughout the UK a very, very hard-working, women's business network. So at one level, women do network and support each other. But I can't see why I think it needs to be taken to another level.
Yeah,
it needs to be something like a women's bank. Right, if the other banks won't represent us.
Yep, I agree. I think it's fantastic.
Starts at the moment, have you noticed, like a really good example is Marks and Spencer's.
Yep.
So they started their bank, obviously aimed at women. It's a special bank, but hello. How many women are on the board of the Marks and Spencer's bank? I don't know off the top of my head. But if it's not 50%, we shouldn't bank with them. Simple as that.
Well, Marks and Spencer's also withdrew all their work and all their underwear collection that they did in South Wales. And for that reason, I do not buy Marks and Spencer's underwear. I buy something else instead. But yeah. I will not buy things in certain places for particular reasons, for ethical reasons.
Thank you very much. Another question over here this time.
Hi there, it's Ruth Walters. Thanks, Janet, that was excellent. One point I picked up on was you talked about celebrities and support systems. What do you feel has made up your support system that's really allowed you to kind of chip away at that concrete above you? So who or what do you surround yourself with in terms of additional support to be able to go forth and do these great things?
I don't really have one. It's the truth of the matter. When I was at the BBC...
Do you have a cleaner?
Oh, yeah, I have a cleaner. Well, yeah, I have a cleaner. Very well paid in central London, actually. Can I plead for migration? They're very hard to get. Really hard to get. My support system is, yes, I have a cleaner. Yes, I have a partner. But you know what it's like with a partner? It's like... Well, don't get me started on because you have to have the special voice and the special pleading and the many repetitions. And actually, do you know what? I'm quite good at that, because when you work in television, you're so used to telling film crews everything 3 times, or the 2. You tell them what you want to do, you tell them a second time in case they haven't understood it, and then you tell them a 3rd time to make bloody well sure they do it your way and not their way. So I'm used to saying everything 3 times anyway, so I'm sorry if I did in my speech, but it's kind of inbred in me. To come back to your point, my support system consists of, yes, I have people help me at home, but then I work from home, and I work in any one week for probably 10 different people. So, yeah, I have an agent, and I have a PA who works from her home and comes to my home 1 day a week. But I fit in with her, and I let her work wherever she wants to work. It doesn't matter to me whether I don't need to see her, because that's the beauty of technology now. But when I was started out, I had to do 2 jobs at once to get ahead. And this is what I always tell the girls at school. I did part-time jobs, I did extra work to make sure that I had more qualifications and more on my CV than anyone else, and more outside interests, and did more stuff, so that my CV was packed with things that I had done. And that's something you've got to say to girls, you've got to package yourself. You've got to look at the bit of paper that describes you, and you've got to read really, really well. But I didn't ever have a support system, no, until I had a full-time job for example, at the BBC, then I made sure, like Rosemary is doing here, that I was surrounded by smart women. And then I delegated. It was fantastic. Because when you're surrounded by smart women, you feel fantastic. You just feel you're confident. And there's no infighting either. Whereas when I've worked in, when I was a newspaper editor, obviously the previous editor who was a bloke, was sacked for me. And can you imagine what that was like, to arrive at work? He was sacked at 12 o'clock and I had to start work at 2 o'clock. And they'd all been summoned to the canteen and told at lunchtime that I was arriving. So then you're confronted with a workforce of, a couple of hundred people. But I had some very good advice, which was 1/3 would loathe me on site. They'd hate me. No point in bothering with them. 1/3 would like me, hurrah. And 1/3 I could coerce and work on into, then I'd have a 2/3 majority. If you're surrounded, if you've got a majority of people who are on your side, that is a support system. But if you're the only woman working in an environment with people who are hostile to you, I think it is very, very difficult. So women who, I would say, you need to work, have the support system is not necessarily the obvious, like PAs, and it's other women that you feel that you can discuss work with. And I do that all the time. I do that all the time. And it's not easy, but you need to be able to talk to other women about sound them out, get another perspective.
My name's Gwenno Dafydd, and I'd like to say two things. Firstly, you mentioned earlier role models and examples of girls going out to schools. I think you should be aware of something the Welsh Government is doing. There is a scheme called Big Ideas, Wales Big Ideas, and there are girls who have created their own businesses and they go out to primary schools and to secondary schools and also universities talking about the businesses that they've set up. They are brilliant role models for girls and they talk of various ways of working in the world today that doesn't depend on the presence of men and where girls have more control over their working lives. So it's very important you're aware of that, and we're at the forefront here in Wales and it's been happening for many years. And I'm very privileged to be one of those role models myself. And the second thing I have great interest in is the fact that you went to a school, a girls' school, and I've just finished writing a book about role models, girl role models who do stand-up comedy, and I have a great interest in role models, and I had one myself, and she was my mentor for 20 years, and I was very lucky to have her. Now, one of the things I wanted to say was that I've interviewed over 26 women, and over half of them had gone to girls' schools, and that was interesting because there are statistics in America that show that girls who go to girl-only schools do so much better in their future than if they'd gone to schools where both sexes go.
Yeah. Point. Yeah. Your point about women going to girls' schools is a very interesting one, because obviously when you go to an all-girls school, you're a bit cheesed off because you think, oh God, the ones at a mixed school are having a better time. But once you settle into it, I remember it really clearly. The first year thinking, oh God, my sister's having a better time at mixed school. But after you're in such a focused environment. But having said that, what I said earlier about girls sneering at other girls over there, they still pick on you over your appearance, but you have removed that whole thing about boys. It's true. So I do think that going to segregated school, single-sex school, is a good idea from my own experience, because I obviously left school with a lot of confidence. Although when you're 18, it doesn't seem like that. You don't know that you're confident. But funnily enough, when I arrived at my first year at university with the 95 boys, they seemed 2 years younger than me, emotionally, social skills, zero. You know, they were kind of stranded, and that was interesting because obviously the school that I had gone to had taught me to get on and do, you know, to have a kind of positive moving forward attitude, and I had these 95 boys who seemed to be kind of stuck at 16, and I think that is true.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. We've got a couple of questions, one here, lady.
Hi. The one programme on the telly that really irritates me more than anything else is The Apprentice, and particularly the last winner, if you like, who I don't like the catty fighting that's portrayed on there. The fact that if women have to go into business, they have to almost like eat each other up to get there and look the most glamorous in high heel shoes, tottering down to make bargains in Oxford Street and all that business. I find that a very bad portrayal of women going into business, and particularly the last episode. And the other one as well is the children one. You know, the one.
The what, sorry?
The junior apprentice.
Oh, yeah.
That is such a bad.
But do you
program.
really think these programmes are about business? I mean, we're all grown up in this room. We look at them, we just think they're like cartoon comedies, don't you? Do you worry, though, that young people watch them and think that's how you've got to be? Because I must say that on The Last Apprentice, when I saw all the women with the long, flicky hair, I thought, hello, we're back in the world of the shampoo commercial. And also, they all had the high heels on, the tight skirts. I just thought, actually, I don't know any women in any of the jobs that I do that look like that. It's like in a special telly version of business, and it's a formula. But yeah, it is. I agree with you. It's ridiculous.
It was just that obviously I've been self-employed with my husband for the last 15 years. Sorry, I've been in business for 15 years with my husband, and I agreed with you about the 3 times thing of telling.
Yeah, get the three, divide the workforce into 3. Yeah.
It's almost like you have to say it 3 times till he thinks it's been his idea originally anyway, if you see what I mean. I know that sounds an awful thing to say, but it's almost like he's had this ping of inspiration, but I might have said it to him 6 months ago, but it's a... but that programme in particular, my children watch it, obviously, because they see it. I do worry that those sort of programmes are bad.
Can I tell you another thing that's worrying about that programme? Not just the way the women look, but it's this false fighting. Every situation is ramped up to a confrontation. So then you've got the girls versus the boys, or the girl in the team, is she going to be useless with the boys? So it's all made into a series of meaningless skirmishes, but it's all done in the name of entertainment. And kind of what you need is another television programme that goes on afterwards that's set in the real world. But it's all about ratings, and that programme has got nothing to do with business whatsoever.
Janet, thank you. Do you know, the more things we're discussing, more we could go on. There's just so much to talk about. But there's one question here, then one question there. And if you could just try and make it slightly quite short, get to the point across, that would be great.
Hello, I'm Meryl Randall-Jones. I'm from the charity Age Cymru. I was particularly drawn to the presentation today because of the portrayal of women in the media. And I'd like to know your thoughts as how we can get more older people and keep them in the media. Once they seem to hit 40 or 50, they're gone. There's an awful lot of older people out there who've got a lot of good things to say, who are professional. What can we do to keep them actually still in the media?
Women on television?
On television, yeah. Columnists like yourself, but female presenters, Sarah, newsreading. You know,
someone was talking to me about doing a new show for one of the major television channels, and they said, well, of course, the big thing about you, Janet, is you're a pensioner. So, yeah, I know I'm a bloody pensioner. But you're the pensioner they all aspire to be. And then you just, but it's all, but no, I know, but you know, there's a sick side to that. It's like, I'm a pensioner that I don't look like a pensioner, so I'm an acceptable pensioner. I'm not a granny pensioner. I'm not a dribbly, you know, incontinent pensioner. I'm a pensioner who comes packaged like this. And, you know, how old am I? 66. But I don't, the only reason I don't look my age is because I talk all the time and I keep mobile, because believe me, if I stood still and everything sagged, I'd look 166. But it's bizarre that there aren't more women higher up, more prominently on television. And that's fascinating, because the women are at the top levels of the BBC and Channel 4 and ITV. Women are occupying these jobs, but they're not putting their gender on the telly. Oh, don't get me started on the geriatrics. Yeah, and Paxo with that terrible beard. What's that all about? Yeah, well, exactly. If women came on with underarm hair, that would be the equivalent. If Fiona Bruce read the news one night with underarm hair, we might have got somewhere. I don't know the answer. Obviously, I present Loose Women on ITV, and they have a complete cross-section, and they're always really careful. And Sherry Houston and I are, you know, the age we are. And we know from the research in that programme that women, it really resonates with women. And they email you and tweet you all the time and feel that you're in their home and you're talking to them. And that it's an important thing for women to feel there's someone who understands them, who's of their generation. Tony Hall, the new Director General, has said, I think, that half of all the women presenting, half of all the people presenting news programmes are going to be female by like next year, or some ludicrously impossible to achieve target. But he did say it, so look it up.
Hi, I'm Bev Stevens, and I work with Gypsy Travellers in Pembrokeshire. And talking about TV programmes, I mean, My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, the impact that that had on women, gypsy women, has been absolutely horrendous. And it's very, very difficult to get through to the media that we need to be having more positive programmes, but they don't seem to, you know, how would I go about improving that, really?
You have to write to the commissioning editors and put proposals to the commissioning editors. I think television, this sounds a bit of a tough thing to say, but you get the television you deserve. If you, you know, we're moaning about The Apprentice. If we don't like it, we shouldn't watch it, then the ratings would dip and it'd be off in one season. It's the same as The Sun. We all moan about The Sun. People buy it. But if women as a block stopped buying The Sun, Page 3 would have disappeared ages ago. And we have to, it comes back to what I said earlier, we have to use our power, our political power and our financial power and our purchasing power to force change, because that's the only way. And with television, if you want more programmes aimed at you and interest groups you represent, you have to stop watching other programmes and then they'll come to you.
Hi, my name's Laura. I just wondered if you could share your thoughts about Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In movement and the positive difference she's making by promoting mentoring for young women.
I thought that that was a really, really good idea. I haven't read the book, I've got to say. I've read about the book. There's also danger when the CEO or, you know, these women who run big companies offer advice to other women. I wonder what women at the coalface feel about being given advice by the CEO of a major company who has a huge, we were talking about support systems earlier, and she has a huge support system and she leaves the office every day. Isn't she the one that banned home working? Yeah, but when I read about these women, I always think they're in their ivory towers issuing diktats to other women low down the work, you know, the coalface, who have to fit in, and telling women to have the confidence and, you know, help other women. You've got to somehow start in small ways. And I don't think some of these books are that helpful, actually. I think they're quite frightening. I always say to people, you have to get up in the morning and tell yourself you're fantastic. And that's what I do. I just lie there like a blob and I say, I'm bloody brilliant. I am the most intelligent person I'm going to meet all day. I'm absolutely fantastic. Because if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it. So I don't need to buy a book to know that. And that's the top bit of advice.